Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessa, and I'm so happy you're here for this episode of Better Sex. I've dedicated my professional life to helping couples enjoy a fulfilling, intimate life. I believe that sex is important. Our connections to other people matter, and we're not living our life to the fullest if we aren't connecting emotionally and sexually with our partner. That's why I'm here, bringing ideas and information to help you live and love better. So sometimes human behavior is inexplicable, right? I mean, this just does not make sense, especially when we talk about, romantic behavior, relationship behavior, sexual behavior. Like, some of this stuff is just strange and crazy and baffling, I guess you might say. And I thought it might be interesting to take an episode of the show and investigate a little bit of what's called evolutionary psychology. Like, how does the fact that we are a great ape inform what we see and experience in our sexual lives together, in our sexuality, in our natures, right? So I have a guest today, Rebecca Coffey, who is an award-winning science journalist and a television documentarian. And over the course of her career, a long career, she's been writing regularly for Scientific American and Discover magazines and newspapers, and interviewed, all the time, has some books out. She's fascinating, very fun, and she's here to share some insights about how we are like the other great apes and how we are different and what it all means. I hope you enjoy it. So, Rebecca, thank you so much for being on the show today.
I'm so happy to be here.
So I would love to start off with just a little bit of introduction to you and your interest in some of these topics.
Well, I'm a science journalist, and I've been writing for my pretty long career for a variety of national magazines, especially Scientific American and Discover magazine. And as I've written, I've become increasingly fascinated with evolutionary psychology. And then when the Me Too movement started and the world exploded in cocktail lounges and bars with people yelling at each other about you did this and they did that and you're all this way, I was distressed. I thought, why can't everyone see that we are just acting out our animal roles? That men are programmed to do one thing and women are programmed to do another, and that puts us in some sort of conflict. But we are supposed to be more cognitively evolved than this. We're supposed to have rules and culture that help us deal with the differences. And so I wrote these essays.
Okay. And it sounds a little bit like, all right, we have our animal nature that explains a lot of things, and yet that doesn't excuse plenty of these things in our culture, right?
It doesn't excuse much at all.
Okay.
We have our animal nature that demands that men, like all great apes, and humans are great apes. There are orangutans, there are gorillas, there are chimps, there are bonobos, and there are humans. And like all great apes, the male of the species has the biological imperative to spread his seed as widely as he can. And the woman, or the female, has to be choosy because she can only be pregnant so many times in her life. And when she's pregnant, she's got the next, 12 years easily for, going back several million years. You raise that child.
Yeah.
So you have to be choosy about what sperm you accept. So the biological role for men is to say, please, please, and oh, yes, And the biological role for women is to say, maybe.
So I got to say, internally, right? It's like, okay, I get the science of this. I can wrap my mind around that, and yet I'm rebelling around the generalizations and maybe you get this response.
Well, and you should. For one thing, we're not all the average person.
Right.
And nature and nurture both contribute to our behavior. And really here, I'm only talking about biology.
Right. So important to distinguish that for the listeners, right? This is the biology of this. Okay. So your interest in the more sexual, behavioral topics is more recent, it sounds like.
Yes. As a journalist, I've covered, physics and chemistry and magnetism and biology. I've written full-length books about psychological topics. I wrote a book about psychological trauma. I wrote a book about school murder. And now there's this book really about evolutionary psychology and the evolution of both lust and romance, because they're two very different things.
Right. Yeah, and hopefully today we'll have time to talk about both, but I thought we'll start with lust, right? Yes. So your essay, The Human Ape, right, is looking at this. And like you said, scientists believe that humans are a great ape, but you say there are sexual differences that set humans apart. So could you talk about those and how they affect us?
Okay, so I've just talked about how we are just like the great apes, right? That the men do one thing and the women do the other. But we are very different from great apes. For example, female great apes all have really large, significant signs of estrus. Estrus meaning their most fertile times. And basically what happens is their external genitalia get red and swollen, and it drives the males crazy.
Right.
It just, there's nothing but sex happening, all sex all the time when a female is in estrus. Well, humans are the only great apes that don't have visible signs of estrus. So what happened in evolution? There's an interesting guy, his name is Desmond Morris. You may remember him in the late 60s and since then. In the late 60s, he published The Naked Ape. And he's published consistently since then.
Okay.
And he's a zoologist and an ethnologist. He's a Brit. And he has a very interesting idea, which is when humans stood up, they lost estrus because it wasn't visible anymore. And so what replaced it in women were breasts and rounded hips and rounded lips. And what replaced it in men was larger penises. Men have, relative to their body size, the largest penises.
Right. That I had heard somewhere.
Yes. And so these are we needed ways to attract each other. Now, one really fascinating bit to me is the human response to the color red. Now, Morris suggests that that's left over from estrus, from seeing the external swollen genitalia.
Right.
It could also be left over from seeing meat in nature, right?
Yeah.
That for some reason in the lab, humans respond to the sight of the color red by having motor output that is stronger and quicker. And across human cultures, all cultures that have, most cultures, even pre-industrial cultures, can name the color white and the color black. There are many cultures that don't have names for a third color. But if there is a name for a third color, it is red.
Wow.
So red is in some way special. And Desmond Morris believes that red survives in Western culture anyway, in lipstick. So there's evidence back in the Sumerians 5,000 years ago that people were crushing gems and decorating their lips and their eyes that way. Cleopatra used to squish bugs and decorate her lips with blood. And red lipstick is, of course, the sexiest come on, right?
Right.
And so Desmond Morris, lots of people don't agree with him about many things. He's a
Controversial.
controversial theorist, but he is a great namer of things. He calls lips super labia. Yes, it's one of my favorite.
And I don't have the answer to this, but as you're talking about, well, female people, are the only apes without visible signs of estrus. I thought I'd read somewhere too about potentially masking who might be the father of children. I mean, not like it's our choice, but that evolutionarily there might have been some other role.
Yes, and that's also often cited as a reason for promiscuity. Women want to be selective about who they mate with, but they also want to protect their children from males who aren't the child's father.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, gorillas, one way to get, if you're a male gorilla, one way to get a woman to become your mate is to murder her child.
Ugh.
Because if you murder her child, she's going to say, well, clearly the guy can murder children.
Yeah.
So I'd rather have him want to protect my children. So from here on out, all my children will be his.
Wow. It also puts females back into estrus, right? I mean, they'll be ready to mate.
Absolutely. They're ready to mate right away.
Wow. I mean, if I find myself thinking, wow, I hope we're not as much like apes as maybe we are. I don't know.
Right. I think we are as much like apes as we used to be. Now, Freud used to say that one of the things that distinguishes us from the other great apes is civilization. Of course, they didn't have civilization that would rein in their impulses. But in fact, in their small clans, the rules were harsh, but they were well known. And those were cooperative societies. And so Desmond Morris argued, but we've always had civilization. That isn't the problem here. What has made us so dysfunctional and warlike is not the lack of civilization, but the presence of crowding. That crazy people today behave like caged animals. They might bite themselves. They might even kill themselves. They pace back and forth. There are classic caged animal behaviors that you can see in caged great apes or in prisons and mental institutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is fascinating stuff. Are there some other differences, sexual differences that set us apart from the apes? I mean, you mentioned the not having the signs of estrus.
Well, my favorite species of great ape is the bonobo. Let me just kind of quickly trace the tree.
Okay.
The orangutans and the gorillas, the orangutans especially, they just rape. That's how they spread their seed. And the gorillas, they might kill the child in order to get her to come along. Chimps, when a female goes into estrus, she is willing to have sex with every male who is interested. Bonobos have happy sex all day long, every day, with anyone of either gender. They use it to form alliances. The males do this thing called penis fencing. They will hang near each other upside down from trees and bat their penises against each other until orgasm.
Okay.
It's just a friendly, wonderful place to have sex. So humans lie somewhere between orangutans and bonobos.
Okay.
What we've got that they don't have is guilt.
Yeah. True.
Thank you, civilization.
Yeah. So do we resemble, I guess different people resemble everything from an orangutan?
Yeah, I think that there are, I would call Weinstein an orangutan.
Yeah.
And when I heard about Al Franken, and I thought, Franken is just being a bonobo.
Yeah.
He's just being kind of a gleeful idiot about sex.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting
So
lens.
it's fun to have this lens. I'm not sure it's all the perfect lens, but it is fun to be able to examine human behavior because if nothing else, you don't spend all of your time angry.
Yeah. So what can men and women couples sort of take from this? What could help them in their sex life or some understanding or,
Well, I think that if, knowledge is power. I
Mhm.
think that if you understand, for example, when I was first pregnant, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I could not stand the smell of my husband. He had to sleep on the floor
Wow.
for 9 months. Women have one of the biological mechanisms that we have that helps us choose who to have sex with and not is that we have much more sensitive noses
Hmm.
and we have a much lower threshold for disgust. Now, I still wanted to be married to him. I wanted to have more children and I wanted him to be the father. But there was something my body was telling me about, look, you've got what you need right now. Don't disturb the baby that's there. So just kind of understanding where that came from helped us both laugh rather than be dismayed about
Mhm.
what was going on. So I think that understanding our evolutionary past helps us seem, yes, more animalistic to each other, but more human. We don't become each other's enemy. We're not wrong. Nothing's wrong with us.
Okay, so what would you say to, let's say, the guy at this point who's acted like an orangutan, right? And then maybe he's just saying, "Hey, it's my animal nature, right? It's genetically imperative to sow my seed."
Yeah, so I'd call the police. You know, I don't think that coercive behavior in humans is forgivable.
Yeah. So we've
Yeah,
got a biological impulse.
right, which we're supposed to control.
Yeah, I need to, right? I
Yeah,
mean, that's not an
yeah,
unreasonable
yeah.
expectation.
It's not, but the conflict comes in because women are so disempowered across the board in this culture
Hmm.
that when we say no, which is our biological not just prerogative, but it's our job to say
Hmm.
no to most of the comers on.
Yeah.
It's not listened to.
Yeah.
And we suffer horrible consequences, some of us.
Right. Right. Hi, Jessica here. Just taking a quick break in the show today, and I have exciting news. My new book is available on Amazon. I'm so excited. I've been working on this for about 1.5 years, and I'm just thrilled to have it to share. So it's called Sex Without Stress, A Couple's Guide to Overcoming Disappointment, Avoidance, and Pressure. So if you search on Amazon, you will find it. It will be available in print form as well as Kindle. It's being released September 25th, so depending on when you're listening to this, it may already be out or it's available for pre-order. I wrote this for all the couples out there, good couples who are struggling with sex and don't see a way forward. Totally normal to struggle with your sex life because we run into obstacles in life, from sexual dysfunction to lack of desire, even just a busy life. It's normal to struggle. It's very common. And the book helps you transform how you think about sex, how you think about relationships, and then walks you through an experiential 9-phase process to totally transform your sex life. If you're interested, look it up. I'd appreciate feedback or reviews. If you read it, I'd love to know what you think. Back to the show. All right, so the flip side of the coin, we go from lust to romance.
Yes. So
Can you speak to that a little bit?
yes, here's my favorite story about kissing, because romance is too non-specific.
Okay.
Kissing, Desmond Morris, Freud, most ethnologists believe that kissing, our fondness for kissing, originates in nursing. And for bottle babies, there's all sorts of nuzzling that goes on and being fed and bottle fed. It's hearkening back to that kind of intimacy. And by the way, all of the great apes kiss their young.
Ah, okay.
But bonobos are the only ones that French kiss.
Ah.
But with bonobos, and they don't French kiss their young, I don't
They French
think.
they French to kiss each other. Yeah.
But it's not necessarily romantic. It might just be titillating, and it might be a way to ask and quickly get the answer to the question, what is there available to eat around here and where is it? You taste it on the inside of someone's mouth. So we have no evidence of romance among chimps or bonobos or orangs or gorillas. But we do have evidence of romance among a high percentage, around 80% of pre-industrial cultures. At first, anthropologists thought it was only Western cultures and some more advanced Eastern cultures that had romance. But in fact, if you look at a huge database of cultures, you will see that across cultures, there are certain romantic behaviors, one of which is suicide. If she won't have anything to do with you and you jump out of a tree, well, that's not just simple sex you wanted. That was a romantic feeling.
Huh.
Yeah. Now, Charles Darwin thought that all cultures don't kiss, but they all have kissing-like behaviors, including things like patting your arm, right? Patting your head, patting your cheek, rubbing noses. The Trobriand Islanders of it's an island near New Guinea, have my single favorite kissing-like behavior. When they are making love and they have an orgasm, they leap toward their lover. I have to assume they're with their lover, but and bite off the lover's eyelashes.
Oh my gosh.
Like behavior. So again, people are different.
Yeah. So how are anthropologists measuring this romantic behavior in older cultures, that don't exist? Like how do they know about suicide or kissing or anything else?
Well, over the last decades, they have been teams of anthropologists have been compiling and tabulating their data and putting it all into a shared database. And so they have that to do meta-analyses on. Meta-analysis basically is study of studies.
Right.
So they have that, and if they're smart, the current ones call up and interview by phone the ethnologists who collected the data, because often you don't know that what you're looking at is a romantic behavior.
Right. If you're there studying something else or some other lens.
Right. And you're just filling in a chart. But if somebody calls you and says, hey, but did anybody jump out of trees?
Mm-hmm.
And why? So that's it. It's largely old data that still exists, and many of the researchers are still alive and available for interviews.
Yeah. Okay, so the apes kiss their young.
Mm-hmm.
Do most of them kiss each other? Do any of them besides the bonobos?
The chimps do. Chimps and chimps can French kiss too, but not to the extent that bonobos do. And bonobos spend more time having sex facing each other, and bonobos spend more time walking upright. They're a little smaller than chimps, but they weren't recognized as a separate species until the 1920s because they look so much like chimps.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the earliest evidence of human kissing?
So our earliest evidence, I think it's in the Athara Veda, and I think that's about the year. Let me see if I've got that here. That's about the year 1500 BC, I think. Yes. So the Athara Veda is a Hindu scripture, and it means the knowledge storehouse of procedures for everyday life.
Wow.
And it includes...
Wouldn't that be useful?
Yes. It includes a reference to smelling with the mouth. And then the Kama Sutra, which many people believe is a sex manual, but it's not really. It's It's really a Sanskrit text that discusses love and lovemaking as part of a guide to gracious living.
Okay.
So it was written between 400 and 200 BC, and it devoted a whole chapter to kissing, but it really describes kissing rather than give instructions for how to kiss, which is what people think the Kama Sutra does. It really
Right.
is descriptions. Now, I had some fun comparing how North Americans kiss now. And what I got was 7 tips from bustle.com.
Okay.
And then I compared them to the descriptions from the Kama Sutra.
Oh, do tell.
So bustle.com says, try an out of the blue kiss, by which I think they mean take her by surprise.
Surprise, right.
Use a lot of tongue.
Okay.
Make them want more. Talk about a non-specific instruction.
Yeah, right.
You're supposed to do that. Put
If I
chocolate
only knew how.
Yeah. Focus on the lips, but don't just stick to the lips. Talk about it. And this is my favorite. Location. Okay. So that's 2018.
Okay.
So the Kama Sutra, sometime between 400 and 200 BC, describes a throbbing kiss when our lower lip moves our lover's lower lip, but not the other. The pressed kiss when we press our lover's lower lip with much force. The touching kiss when our tongue touches our lover's. So we've all been kissing, and look, we've all had throbbing kisses, pressed kisses, and touching kisses, but we don't talk about that on bustle.com.
Right. Interesting. But a lot of interest in kissing, right? And all this time.
I'm assuming it will never go away.
Yeah. And so I guess you already answered the question about is kissing universal, some sort of kissing gesture. What do you say? Kissing behavior.
Kissing like behaviors is what Darwin called them. Oh, I've just stumbled on my number for how frequent romance is in pre-industrial cultures. 146 of 166 cultures
had some evidence of romance.
Have evidence of romance, yes.
Yeah. And I would imagine that even, pair bonding, which maybe we've had all along, but, evidence of lifetime bonds and that kind of thing would also be
which even
part of the data.
Yeah, but geese do pair bonding, and they're not necessarily romantic about each other.
Right.
For many of us, it's the devil you don't know and the devil you know. And you know.
Fascinating.
Yes.
So what would you say, what's been the most surprising or controversial part of your work? As you write about this stuff, what kind of responses do you get? What's been the...
Well, many people suspect me of trying to defend rapists, which I'm not trying to do at all.
Okay.
Many people suspect me of being too genitally focused. There's an essay in the Science and Lust book called The Happy Wives of Tall Men. And there was research done in Indonesia by a South Korean team. And they found that when a man was 4 inches taller than his wife, the wives were 4% happier on a general scale of happiness.
1% per inch, basically.
Right, 1% per inch. Now, the researchers didn't attribute this to penis size at all.
Yeah.
So, they're saying that there is an evolutionary preference among women for larger men because they're better protectors.
Yeah.
And I buy that. I also, there's also a theory called the sexy sun hypothesis. And that would predict that women choose taller men because they want taller sons. Women want their genes to survive through generations.
Right.
And they value largeness. They value size in men, which means they don't only value it in mates, they value it in sons because they want sons to mate successfully. So I do get it. I get accused of being genitally focused, and of trying to excuse the behavior of rapists. And I don't think either accusation holds water.
Right. So where can people find, say a little, maybe another word about your book, or where people can find you and learn more, find your essay?
So the book is called Science and Lust, and it's real science, and it is, I hope, presented in a way that makes it very readable. If it's not fun, nobody's going to want to read it.
Yeah.
And it's available everywhere. And you can find more information about it at scienceandlust.com, and more information about me at RebeccaCoffey.com. And Coffey is spelled Coffey.
Great. And we'll definitely put links in the show notes to all that too, so people can find it.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This was fascinating and entertaining.
Thank you. It was fun for me too.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.